The desert wind howled across the dunes, carrying whispers of war. Beneath the blazing sun of Palestine, a colossal army marched to 26,000 men under Saladin, their banners fluttering like waves of green and gold. Each step of their horses sent tremors across the earth, a storm of power moving toward the heart of the Crusader Kingdom. And against this storm stood a boy, King Baldwin IV, the leper king of Jerusalem, who could barely hold a sword yet refused to yield. Surrounded by only 500 knights, he faced the greatest military commander of his age. What followed would become one of the most miraculous victories in history, the day when faith and courage defeated an empire. Baldwin was born into privilege, the son of Amalekai, king of Jerusalem, yet fate had cursed him before he could even understand the word. When he was a child, his tutor, William of Tyre, noticed that Baldwin felt no pain when bitten during a game with other boys. What appeared strange at first soon became horrifying. The mark of leprosy, a disease that decayed the body but not the mind. In an age when lepers were cast away as cursed by God, Baldwin's future seemed already written in despair. But the boy refused pity. He learned to ride, to fight, and to think like a warrior king, despite the numbness in his limbs. Every movement pained him, but every triumph strengthened his resolve. When his father died suddenly, Jerusalem needed a ruler, not a martyr, and Baldwin, just 16, took the crown with a trembling hand and unbreakable will. Though his body weakened, his spirit grew iron strong. Even Saladin, hearing tales of this leper king, reportedly laughed, seeing him as a symbol of decay, a dying child leading a dying kingdom. Yet in the sickly boy's eyes burned something no disease could kill, the conviction that faith and courage could still shape the fate of nations. Baldwin would not rule long, but the world would never forget the day he made the impossible real. Across the deserts of Egypt, a new power was rising under the crescent moon. Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, known simply as Saladin, had united the Muslim world under his banner. Born a Kurdish soldier, he had become sultan through intellect, patience, and unshakable faith. To his followers, he was a hero, pious, just, and destined to reclaim Jerusalem from the Crusaders. To his enemies, he was the embodiment of terror and purpose. By 1177, Saladin commanded an empire stretching from Cairo to Damascus. His armies were vast, disciplined, and unstoppable, a tide of warriors ready to crush the Crusader states once and for all. He saw in Jerusalem a fractured kingdom ruled by barons more loyal to gold than God, and at its head, a sickly monarch. It seemed only a matter of time before the holy city fell once again into Muslim hands. Confident in his destiny, Saladin gathered his generals and planned a swift invasion. The timing was perfect. Most Crusader forces were far north with Count Raymond, leaving only a skeleton defense. He would march through the plains, capture Ashkelon, and then take Jerusalem itself. To Saladin, it would be a holy victory written by Allah. To Baldwin, it would be a fight for existence. In the citadel of Jerusalem, Baldwin's advisors whispered of surrender. They urged him to stay within the walls, to negotiate, to hide his leprous face from the people who still called him king. But Baldwin would not hear it. "If I must die," he said, "I will die in battle, not in bed." His voice was calm, but beneath his crown, the disease was spreading, robbing him of sight, strength, and touch. Yet no illness could take his courage. He called upon his knights, rallying every man still loyal to the cross. They came in small numbers, hardened men of faith and fury, their armor shining in the desert sun. Among them were the Knights Templar, the holy order whose vows bound them to fight unto death. They saw in Baldwin not a dying man, but a living saint, a leader whose soul burned brighter than his fading flesh. Across the kingdom, priests prayed and peasants wept as news came that Saladin's army had crossed the border. The smoke of burning villages stained the horizon. The Saracen tide was coming, unstoppable and immense. But Baldwin gathered his few hundred knights, placed the relic of the true cross before them, and swore, "If we perish in the name of God." The army that rode from Ashkelon was pitifully small compared to the sea of enemies awaiting them. 500 knights, a few thousand infantry, and a young king half-blind and racked with fever. Yet they rode with hearts ablaze, their banners fluttering like wings of hope against the endless sands. Baldwin's face was pale as marble, his armor light to ease his pain, but his resolve was unshakable. They marched north through the burning plains, following reports of Saladin's advance. Each mile was a struggle, disease, heat, exhaustion, yet the men sang hymns, believing their king fought with angels at his side. The Templars rode at the vanguard, grim and silent, swords ready to taste blood for Christendom. They knew this was suicide, but also glory. At night, Baldwin would rest upon his saddle, his skin bandaged and his voice barely a whisper. Yet he prayed for strength not to live, but to inspire. He told his men that victory was not measured by numbers, but by faith. And somewhere deep in the desert, Saladin's vast army feasted, unaware that death was already riding toward them. Saladin's scouts reported nothing but chaos in the Crusader ranks, confusion, fear, retreat. The Sultan believed the Christians were fleeing north, too terrified to face his might. Laughing, he allowed his men to spread out, gathering loot and captives as they advanced toward Jerusalem. His army became a wandering city, campfires glowing like stars across the desert. He ordered no tight formations, no discipline, believing no enemy would dare challenge him. Even his guards relaxed, drinking from stolen wines and laughing as the desert wains carried the sound of victory yet to come. Saladin rode among them, serene and confident, already imagining the banners of Islam rising above Jerusalem once more. But even the greatest generals can be blinded by certainty. Saladin's strength became his weakness. He believed the enemy broken when, in truth, they were marching to strike him where he least expected. The young leper king was coming, and with him rode the vengeance of the cross. It was near the small village of Montgisard, close to Ramla, that destiny chose its battlefield. As dawn broke, Baldwin's scouts spotted dust on the horizon, the vanguard of Saladin's forces, scattered and unguarded. The king's council hesitated. They were outnumbered 50 to 1, but Baldwin, feverish and trembling, ordered the attack. "This day," he said, "God will decide between us." The knights formed ranks upon a low ridge, their armor glinting like silver fire. The relic of the true cross was lifted high, and a sudden wind seemed to ripple through their ranks as if heaven itself approved. The priests chanted, the drums beat, and the desert air crackled with tension. Then, with a cry of Deus Vult, God wills it, the line began to move. 500 knights lowered their lances and thundered down the slope. The ground shook as if the earth itself joined their charge. The Saracen front, unprepared, crumbled like sand before a wave. The impossible had begun. Baldwin rode at the center, his body barely held upright by the straps of his saddle. His hands bled beneath his gauntlets, yet he held the cross high for all to see. Around him the Templars struck with divine fury, cutting through the Saracen ranks as though possessed. The thunder of hooves drowned out the cries of the dying, and the desert was swallowed by dust and blood. The first line of Saladin's army shattered under the weight of the charge. Horses crashed into men, swords flashed in the sun, and chaos consumed the field. Baldwin's standard surged forward, a beacon of defiance. The Muslim soldiers, unready and leaderless, panicked and began to flee. The king's banner pressed onward, unstoppable. Saladin, realizing the disaster, shouted for his bodyguard and tried to regroup his men, but the Crusader fury could not be contained. The young king, pale as death, led the charge that broke the greatest army in the East. Faith had become a weapon sharper than steel. Within hours, the field turned into a slaughterhouse. The Saracen formations disintegrated under relentless assault. Men trampled one another in their desperation to escape. The Crusaders, outnumbered beyond reason, fought like angels possessed by divine wrath. Blood soaked the sand until it turned mud beneath their boots. Saladin's banners fell one by one. His command tent was overrun, his camp burned, his supplies looted. The once invincible army now scattered across the plains like frightened cattle. Saladin himself barely escaped on a swift camel, his guards cut down beside him. He rode through the night, his face streaked with disbelief. The impossible had happened. The Sultan of Egypt and Syria had been defeated not by strength, but by the faith of a dying king. Montgisard had become a holy miracle, a victory sung across Christendom as divine proof that courage could overcome destiny. When the battle ended, Baldwin dismounted slowly, his body shaking with pain and exhaustion. The battlefield around him was silent except for the moans of the dying. The young king knelt before the relic of the true cross, his armor dented, his skin bleeding, his face radiant with tears. His men gathered around him, kneeling in prayer. The desert breeze carried the scent of smoke and victory. The survivors of Baldwin's small army looked around in disbelief. Thousands of Saracen dead, their camps abandoned, their leader gone. They had fought the greatest army of their age and lived to tell of it. The victory was not human, it was divine. That night, the stars over Montgisard seemed brighter than ever. The knights spoke of angels on the field, of miracles in the dust. And somewhere far away, Saladin swore vengeance, knowing that this humiliation would haunt him for years to come. When word of the victory reached Europe, bells rang across cathedrals from Rome to Paris. The leper king had done the impossible, defeated Saladin in open battle. Chroniclers called it a miracle. Preachers called Baldwin a living saint. Pilgrims wept upon hearing his story, for they saw in him the triumph of faith over flesh. In Jerusalem, the people flooded the streets to welcome their king. Baldwin rode through the gates, not as a dying boy, but as a savior. Though his face was covered in linen to hide the scars of disease, the crowd saw only a hero crowned by God. His name became legend, a tale whispered by generations of knights to come. But beneath the glory, Baldwin's body continued to decay. The victory at Montgisard had saved Jerusalem for now, but his time was running short, and the shadow of Saladin still loomed beyond the horizon. Humiliated yet unbroken, Saladin retreated to Egypt to rebuild his strength. His pride had been wounded deeply, but his resolve only grew. He studied his defeat, learned from his mistakes, and swore never again to underestimate his enemy. In time, his empire recovered, and his armies grew even stronger. He admired Baldwin's courage, even respected it. In letters to his court, he admitted the young king's valor was unmatched. But vengeance burned in his heart, not hatred, a desire to restore balance, to reclaim the holy city through discipline and faith. Saladin would return, not with arrogance, but with purpose. In Jerusalem, Baldwin prepared for that day. Despite his illness, he fortified cities, strengthened alliances, and held the fragile kingdom together. He knew he would not live to see the final reckoning, but he also knew that Montgisard had shown the world that miracles could be won by mortal hands. By his 20s, Baldwin could barely see. His hands were twisted, his face hidden beneath cloth, and his voice faint. Yet he still commanded his army, still rode into battle strapped to his horse, so he would not fall. His people loved him not for his health, but for his heart. Even Saladin, his old enemy, called him a lion in the body of a lamb. He ruled with wisdom and restraint, balancing faith with diplomacy. Though he could no longer feel pain, his heart carried the weight of every life lost in his wars. Each night he prayed not for victory, but for peace. Yet he knew that in the Holy Land, peace was only a pause between storms. When Baldwin finally died in 1185, the kingdom mourned as if a saint had passed. His body was laid to rest in Jerusalem, the city he had saved, the city he could not feel with his hands, but loved with his soul. 2 years later, Saladin returned. The Crusader states, weakened by internal divisions, faced the full might of his empire. At the Battle of Hattin in 1187, the Christian armies were crushed, and Jerusalem fell. Yet even in triumph, Saladin remembered the boy king who had once defied him. He entered the city not as a butcher, but as a conqueror who honored his fallen foe. The people of Jerusalem were spared, ransomed instead of slaughtered. Many said Saladin's mercy was inspired by Baldwin's courage, the memory of Montgisard still lingering in his heart. Though the walls of Jerusalem changed hands, its soul was forever marked by the day a dying man stood against the world. Baldwin's name faded from politics, but lived on in legend. Tonight he was proof that true kingship came from faith, not flesh. To historians, he was the embodiment of divine will in a mortal body. To God, perhaps, he was simply his most faithful servant. Centuries later, pilgrims still spoke of the field of Montgisard. They said the sands whispered Baldwin's name when the wind blew from the south. Churches were built to honor the victory, and songs were sung of the leper king who dared to fight when hope itself had died. His story crossed generations, a torch of courage carried through the ages. Even Muslim chroniclers spoke of Baldwin with reluctant admiration. They could not deny what had happened that day, 500 knights breaking an army of tens of thousands. To them it was not humiliation, but a lesson from God about pride and destiny. The desert had witnessed something divine. In art, in poetry, in prayer, Baldwin became immortal. The leper king who could not feel pain had become the symbol of endurance, faith, and strength, a reminder that even a broken body can house an unbreakable soul. The sands of Montgisard are silent now, the bones long buried beneath centuries of dust. Yet if you stand there at sunset when the sky burns red, you can almost hear the echo of hooves and the cry of Dies Vult rolling through time. The wind still carries the spirit of Baldwin's charge, 500 knights against 26,000 men, the impossible made real. History remembers kings for their conquests, but Baldwin is remembered for his courage. He fought not to expand an empire, but to defend faith itself, and in doing so, he proved that no disease, no weakness, no fear can silence a heart devoted to purpose. His victory was not of war, but of will. So when the world tells you that you are small, too sick, too broken to matter, remember the leper king of Jerusalem. Remember Montgisard. Remember how faith turned frailty into fire, and how one man's courage burned so bright that even the desert itself could not forget.